a Halloween to remember. It was a crisp Halloween night, and the streets were alive with children running from house to house, their laughter mingling with the soft rustle of fallen leaves. John and his son Jonathan, whom he always called Bubba, were out trick-or-treating for the third hour straight. Bubba, dressed as a pirate, clutched his candy bag, beaming as he eagerly pulled his dad from one house to the next. "Just one more street, Bubba. Then we need to head home, it's getting late," John said, glancing at his watch. The streets were slowly emptying, the costumes and candy being replaced by shadows and silence. But Bubba wasn't ready to call it quits just yet. "Please, Dad, just one more. Look, there's a house with lights on." Bubba pointed ahead to a house standing alone at the end of the block. John hesitated but relented, letting Bubba lead him forward. The house loomed in the distance, its pumpkin lights flickering weakly. As they approached, John noticed something strange. There were no other kids in sight, no decorations other than the dim porch light and the eerie glow of the jack-o'-lanterns. His stomach churned uneasily. "All right, Bubba. Last one," John said quietly, keeping his voice calm despite the growing tension in his chest. Bubba skipped up the steps, but as John followed, he caught a glimpse of something in the shadows beyond the house. A tall figure, motionless. John's blood ran cold. "Bubba, come back," he started, but the words caught in his throat as the figure stepped into the faint glow of the streetlight. The blank, pale mask, the dark, hollow eyes. It was unmistakable. Michael Myers. John grabbed Bubba just as the front door creaked open, the figure moving toward them with slow, deliberate steps. His heart pounded in his chest. They had stayed out too late. "Dad, what's wrong?" Bubba asked, confused by his dad's sudden panic. But John couldn't answer. He spun around, pulling his son down the steps and back toward the street. But Michael Myers was getting closer, his heavy footsteps echoing behind them. John's mind raced as he ran, gripping Bubba's hand tightly. He had heard the stories, the murders, the silent killer who couldn't be stopped. They needed to find a place to hide. They darted down a narrow alley between two houses, John hoping it would buy them time. But when he glanced back, Michael was still there, his dark silhouette gaining on them, relentless and unstoppable. They reached the end of the alley, emerging onto another empty street. John's legs burned, and his breath came in ragged gasps. Bubba was crying now, his pirate hat lost somewhere along the way. "Dad, I'm scared." "I know, Bubba, I know. We're gonna be okay, I promise," John said, though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. Just as Michael was nearly upon them, a shot rang out, loud and piercing in the still night air. John froze, holding Bubba tightly. Michael staggered back but didn't fall. His head turned slowly, focusing on a new presence. Standing in the middle of the street was an older man in a trench coat, a revolver in his hand. His eyes were cold, determined. "Loomis," John whispered, recognizing the name from the news. "Dr. Samuel Loomis, Michael Myers' doctor." Loomis fired again, aiming at Michael's chest, but the masked killer kept coming, his movements slow but unrelenting. John wanted to run, to grab Bubba and flee, but something about Loomis's presence kept him rooted to the spot. "Go!" Loomis shouted at John without turning. "Take your son and get out of here, now!" John didn't need to be told twice. He scooped Bubba up and ran, the echoes of gunshots fading behind him as they sprinted down the street. He didn't stop running until they reached their house, slamming the door behind them and locking every bolt. Breathing heavily, John set Bubba down and collapsed onto the couch. Bubba clung to him, shaking but safe. John hugged his son tightly, listening for any sound outside. The night was still, for now. As they sat there in the dark, John knew they had been lucky. Michael Myers wasn't just a man, he was something else, something that wouldn't stop, and they had only survived because of Dr. Loomis. John shuddered, glancing out the window at the quiet street. He had no doubt that somewhere out there, Michael was still lurking, waiting, but tonight, they were safe. For now.